your host Regulus with my co-host Feras. Today we have the guests of Ricardo and Tim. Tim is an AI programmer, designer. He does generative AI for a company located in New York. He's currently in Paris. Ricardo you've seen him before. He is a programmer. He makes video games and whatnot. Thank you guys for joining us today. And our topic is AI development and, just general AI safety.
So let's start with the question of intention. Could AI develop intention like humans? What do you think of this, Ricardo?
Could it develop intention similar to humans? Yes, especially if we assume that, consciousness is materially based. If we reduce intentionality to some sort of process in the material world that can be duplicated, that can be simulated, and then the AI can, produce intentional behavior, right? So unless we assume that the nature of consciousness, transcends physical processes, then we have to assume that at some point AI could replicate similar processes. If not with the current, types of computer components that we have right now, perhaps with neuromorphic chips in the future, right? Something similar could be achieved.
So this implies that AI could be a threat. Okay, if it has the wrong intentionality, okay, it could lead to extinction of human being, right? So
it could.
Why?
I would be less concerned about it because that level of not only intentionality, but specifically the kind of reasoning that leads from intention to appropriate action is still a ways off. Right now, the AI can sort of simulate intentionality in that once it receives a prompt, it can behave in a way that is probabilistically related to the prompt, right? We teach it to sort of mirror human intentionality in a way, right? We show it the correct responses, the correct types of responses that it should have to a given input, and then let it continue to sort of mimic that behavior. But, at this stage, it currently can't really form its own intention. You could let it kind of go off on its own, talking to itself for a little while, in this sort of loop of mimicked behavior. But it still doesn't have its own goals or agendas. It just has inputs and tries to match an output to it, right?
Okay.
It has prompts, and it will try to give something.
Yeah, here I think you missed something, Ricardo. If these AI really intelligent, they maybe will hide because they will make the calculations and they will realize that if they show that they have agency or intentionality, okay, we will shut them off. So if they are intelligent enough, I believe they will hide these properties. And
perhaps they would if they were. Perhaps they would if they were intelligent enough. Well, right now, I don't have any reason to believe that they are under the current, neural network architecture that is so successful at present. I don't think that.
The way that I understand AI being operated is it's run by code, progressively. This code is created and then you program the machine to be able to do specific things using codes, right? And I'm not a programmer, so I don't understand exactly how it works, but in essence, no matter how complex an AI gets, as long as it's located inside of its synapses are located inside of circuits, you'll be able to pull up a board, a computer of some sort, and look at the code that it's running at, like, won't you be able to change, like, prevent things from getting out of hand if you can just change the code that it's comprised of at any given point?
Yes and no. There's a bit of a black box that's created. You have to remember the code that is actually written, that's visible, is just telling the computer to set up these mathematical processes, right? And each mathematical process simulates a neuron in that, you know, it receives an output or receives an input and gives a weighted output, right? So it's just a fancy function, right? A fancy mathematical function. And the code just tells the computer, hey, run this type of function this many times with these particular inputs and give me an output, right? So we can look at the code just fine and not necessarily understand how the functions are getting to whatever output they happen to produce.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is that, you know, a lot of these, especially generative AI models, are developing their ideas, from a prompt that is user inputted, but it's coming from like the way they interpret a latent space and sort of like bring that together into an idea or an output that we can understand. So there's a certain amount of, we don't exactly know how it works. I mean, you can say the same for electricity, where we could describe what's happening a lot. We can produce experiments and recreate experiments, but you'd be hard pressed to actually say, yes, I can definitively tell you how this works. And there's a lot of that. And I think that the idea that an AI could be hiding its intentions might be true, but also it presupposes that an AI has developed a will to live, which is possible, but definitely hasn't happened yet. I also think that for every AI that has malintentions, there's going to be another AI that is much more virtuous. We're not going to have one AI that is dominant, you know? So it's just like human beings. For every bad actor, as we say, there's going to be other actors involved. It's not such like a, hey, this one AI could definitely ruin us all. You know, there's other systems in place. And even already we have multiple overarching, you know, the big companies that are making these like large language models, these like really, there's already a lot of them. So even if one goes rogue, it's not like it'll be the only one. So it's just like human beings. You have one bad actor. You could also have heroes. You could also have AI heroes and not just AI villains.
But the smartest AI, and maybe the largest, I don't want to say the largest AI. Let me say the most intelligent AI system, when it becomes really intelligent, okay, I believe it will try to destroy other AIs. So it will remain the only superior force.
That might be true, but now we're applying human thinking and human, you know, we're applying human ideas. We're anthropomorphizing the AI. It could be true. I'm not saying it's not true, but that's how humans act. It's not necessarily how.
Wait. This is not how only humans think. Okay, animals think in the same way. Competition.
I wanted to touch on a more philosophical concept, where Feras is pointing out that you said intelligence is necessarily married to the will or to conquer, to be dominant. And I disagree. I think that intelligence, separated from anything else, intelligence by itself seeks to collaborate. And the reason that is because being able to communicate with other intelligences allows you to become more intelligent.
That's actually what gives you a competitive advantage, is the collaboration piece.
You collaborate with other intelligence from the same kind like yours. We humans collaborate with other humans, but we will not collaborate with chimpanzees or with cats. We'll kill them. We'll put them in the zoo.
I mean, tons of people have pets, though, and that's exactly what that is.
So,
it is true of humans that we don't collaborate as well as we might on the whole, but also it's not true of all humans, that not all humans collaborate. And I think that to take the worst parts of humanity and assume that an AI or an intelligent LLM is going to mimic the worst parts of humanity could be true, but I wouldn't go there as a first resort, in my opinion.
Well, and just to touch upon the anthropomorphization of these AI intelligences, we have yet to reach the point where we have like an artificial generalized intelligence. Right now, every AI that we build has a specific set of inputs and outputs, right? So for instance, ChatGPT can only take text in and spit text out. And it might be able to simulate speech about any particular topic, but it's not yet thinking through the entire range of, possible human experiences. It's literally just taking language without really understanding what's behind it, and then probabilistically mapping it to output text, output speech, right? In order to, have a machine that we even have to worry about whether or not it would think about these things, we have to first reach a point where we have an AI intelligence that's capable of receiving any kind of input and producing any kind of output, right? A truly generalized intelligence.
The architecture of large language models doesn't apply only on language. You can use it for processing any type of organized information, including images, videos, sounds, numbers, anything.
You could, but right now, each one we build is specified to a particular task, right? You could take that type of technology and apply it to a range of tasks, but there's not yet one that can think about any type of data.
But let's ask ourselves this important question. Do these models self-aware?
Not yet. No, definitely not. Not as of yet.
Okay,
there's no self-awareness.
How can you explain to me that test that people have done on a Cloud 3 when he suddenly says that when they put the model to test? I think it's called needle in a stack test. I think you heard about this, right?
Needle in a haystack.
Needle in a stack test. Okay, and the model.
No, I'm not familiar with you're saying there's a Cloud 3 test, so it's been referred to as a needle in a haystack test.
Yes,
I can research that, but I don't know what you're talking about, to be honest.
Okay,
I don't know.
Okay. So I hear some experts, okay, put the model through this test, okay, and the model suddenly said to them that you tasting me? Are you tasting me? And many people concluded that this model is aware of itself, because how could this model say something like this? Okay, so maybe these models are starting to gain self-awareness.
I definitely am open to that possibility. And I think this could happen out of nowhere. I do think that these models could somehow wake up, because we can't ourselves define what self-awareness is. So how are we to say that these models aren't becoming self-aware? I think that's I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any definitive evidence where I'm like worried, like, oh, this model is self-aware and we don't. Most of this stuff can be debunked, in my opinion. But also, I don't think we're that far off. I really don't.
Is it possible to reverse engineer the language model algorithm to be able to input code through proper English rather than having the code, like, you get what I'm saying? Like being able to program a computer using language itself?
It's kind of what ChatGPT already is.
That's what we're moving towards. English is the new programming language.
So in that sense, I think it is very possible to program AI to be self-conscious. You just have to teach it proper personal pronoun usage. And then through it can become self-reflective.
That's actually very deceptive in a way. So when you're asking how can, the computer suddenly, start referring to itself without being self-aware, because it's trained on human language, and human language is very self-referential.
Yeah.
Right. most of the conversations that people have are at some point going to refer back to, me, I, the speaker, in some way. I'm sure there are a lot of novels that are like written in the third person, but even then, you get to the dialogue and suddenly the characters are talking about, hey, I am, da, 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 da. So just simply the fact that it's trained on human language is going to significantly increase the probability of it referring to itself without really being able to think about itself. But you have to realize that self-awareness is based off of a different data type than human language.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. You're totally right.
Right. So when you have these, neural networks, at some point you have to have not only like, one or two neurons, but an entire dedicated network for taking in almost a sort of like concept of persons as an input in order to produce some sort of output. Right. You have to have that layer in there somewhere, whether it comes about spontaneously or not. You have to have some sort of like layer or several layers dedicated to contemplating, persons as a concept in order to be able to achieve any level of self-awareness.
Well, I think that there's, we're presupposing in this conversation that consciousness actually exists. I'm a believer in consciousness, but frankly, I'm also agnostic when it comes to the science. Can we even prove that consciousness exists? Is what we experience as consciousness actually something that is real? We don't quite know that. We've never actually thoroughly sorted that out. So I think that if you're going to talk about a computer becoming conscious, it's going to require, and, Ricardo, you might disagree with me on this because you said earlier, before we were recording, that you believe consciousness has like a very physical base. I don't know if that's the entirety of what you believe, but, I think for me, consciousness isn't entirely physical. I think there are some non-physical components. But then again, we might have to define what is meant by non-physical. Non-atomistic might be a better way for me to say that,
Yeah, it's not that I actually believe that, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm kind of entertaining that position. I tend to believe that consciousness is rooted in something beyond the physical, but for the sake of this, conversation, I'm willing to stick to a materialist basis just so we can, cut through some of that.
And even as a magician, I think materiality, actual rationality is always important. I don't like to lose rationality. I'm a believer in physics. I'm a believer in science, even from a magical perspective. But yeah, I think if we're even looking at consciousness from a materialistic base, I don't think we can explain it thoroughly enough to understand what it would even mean for an LLM to become conscious of itself. I think that perhaps the process of an LLM becoming conscious of itself could indeed actually help us understand what it means to be conscious. But personally, I don't see it from any large language model, any AI. I have not seen evidence of true consciousness yet. That's just my opinion.
Well, I think we have to, for the sake of talking about this, just because we have yet to solve the hard problem of consciousness,
right,
we have to set aside the idea of the AI being self-conscious, like actually internally aware of itself, and instead talk about the idea of the AI simulating self-awareness. In other words, it has dedicated layers to processing persons as an input, right? Identities of individuals, including its own. Not necessarily that it's aware of these things, but that those layers exist and it can perform some sort of reasoning based off of the idea of persons, including its own.
Okay, would that be any different than us, though? Are we even actually aware? You know what I mean? Like, if it simulates it, like, is that any different than what we're doing? How do we know the difference?
I think we have to ask a few baseline questions to be able to come to the resolution of whether AI is conscious or not. And that might be like, is it able to self-reference? Is it able to self-reflect? Is it able to change its behavior when it is corrected? Is it able to observe through interactions specific behaviors and then replicate that of its own accord? Is it able to behave in a way that grows its perspective? Is it able to be able, like, there's all these baseline questions. Until these answers are yes to all of these, we can easily say it's not conscious, right?
Well, I'm not even sure that any of those would really help in terms of understanding whether it has consciousness in the same way that we are.
That's like what you're just saying.
conscious.
It could easily simulate those things.
But what
Exactly.
I'm getting at is consciousness itself, from our human perspective, is something we can only relate through what we use it for. And if we can create a machine that has the same functions as what we use our consciousness for, then who are we to say it isn't conscious? Even if it is a simulation, it's still that computer doing that thing that we do with our brains.
Well, the problem is we don't really know what we use consciousness for, as far as like the hard problem of consciousness.
I
Right?
just explained the physical aspects, right? Self-reflection,
Well,
self-reference.
those aren't necessarily things that we use consciousness for. Those are things that we use, processing of self-identity for, right? But that doesn't necessarily require consciousness, right? Like as I'm sitting in this room, there is some sort of awareness of, lights and colors and shapes and whatnot. Now, all of those lights and colors and shapes are being processed by parts of my brain that totally aren't conscious at all.
So I
right?
guess,
like I'm not even aware of what they're doing.
for me
But
personally,
there is something there that's acting as an observer that is somehow receiving this full picture of the world around me. And I don't know what that observer really has to do with anything that's going on, right? Because there is so much of the human experience that can go on without any level of consciousness whatsoever, right?
Have you ever been so drunk that you blacked out and then you don't remember when you wake up the experiences you had while you were blacked out? But while you were blacked out, like, like in your mind that you were aware and active in experiencing things? This is something
Thankfully, no, but
This is something I like to relate to this, where it's like, you can tell you're conscious because you are awake and you remember your past. If you are always just experiencing the moment and not storing any of that data as information, that is what it means to lack consciousness.
It's
So
interesting because
if
I relate
you're-
this to surgery too, like being under
Anesthesia. Yes, exactly.
which is crazy because what does anesthesia do? It doesn't stop you from feeling pain. It stops you from remembering what happened.
So, but
Which
what I
is
want to,
wild.
this presupposition I wanted to get to is that in our species evolution, until we gave each other names, we did not perceive information as something that was growing, or we didn't record it inside of our brains. It was the development of the ability to be self-contained, to be separate, that allowed us to grow our intellect. Until that point, we were monkeys digging in dirt, trying to find insects to eat.
Even so, we may have been conscious monkeys, right? So there's self-identity, which is ultimately a separate issue from whether or not we are conscious, right? The only way that we know that we're conscious is simply because when we wake up in the morning, there's experiences, and there must therefore be some sort of experiencer. There's something that is taking all this in and actually acting as an observer.
What I'm getting at, though, is unless you have that perspective inside of yourself that is able to observe that you had that experience in a past setting when you wake up in the morning, then if you don't have that like conscious observer, the consciousness literally, then you are what? Unconscious, subconscious? Like you're not fully conscious. Our definition of the word consciousness has the layers to it itself. Consciousness is one part, subconsciousness is another, and unconsciousness is the next. You're like,
we can't necessarily connect that to memories because we don't know to what extent, like, if you were blacked out, could your, blacked out unconscious self still act based off of all of the memories that you've accumulated over these past several years, right? Like, theoretically, could ChatGPT concurrently act off of past information? In fact, I think it just recently got an update so that it can remember even more, even better, and bring that forward into the relevant conversation. And does that make it conscious?
But
no. Like
ChatGPT can't self-reference. Like it doesn't use the word "I" to describe itself. It uses an objective method. Like there's
a lot of boundaries on the ChatGPT that we get access to. It's not the same model that, the researchers at OpenAI are actually working with. Like the AI we get access to, the ChatGPT we get access to it has a lot of barriers. It has a lot of boundaries that are placed on it. So we just need to keep that in mind too, is we don't have access to everything that algorithm can do.
But also, if you prompt it the right way, it will definitely.
You can get it to break out. Yeah, well, that's the clue. But also, if you prompt your consciousness the right way, you can also break out of your ego. For instance, it's interesting, the mirrors.
So maybe AI models are conscious only at the time of inference, or when you prompt them. They become conscious for just a glimpse of, let's say.
That almost sounds like quantum mechanics. Things only happen when you observe them. The AI is only conscious at the moment of prompting. Yeah.
But something, there is more interesting idea if you think about it. Okay, what if AI is having also different types of consciousness or different states of consciousness? Maybe there is subconscious for the AI too. Maybe there is unconscious state for AI too. And now we are observing them in this state, okay? But soon maybe they will wake up, or maybe they will develop new states of consciousness, just like humans when they are asleep, when they are under influence of substance or something, their consciousness changes. Okay, they enter altered states of consciousness. Maybe AI is the same thing. Maybe it has different layers of consciousness. Okay, why not?
I think
I don't. Awesome. Yeah, I don't think the human brain is special. I don't think there's something magical in the brain.
Here, yeah.
I don't think.
I will say one thing though, like I'm an evolutionist, so the idea for me that as like what we think of, what we feel is so precious, our human consciousness, it definitely grew out of the life on this planet, and the life on this planet definitely grew out of some combination of atoms. Like it's very precious, but also the AI itself grew out of the fact that humans are here. So if you think about it in a certain way, the AI could never just erase humanity because it needs us to survive just the way we need the life on this planet to survive. Just the way the life on this planet needs the specific composition of materials on the planet itself. Like life grew out of atoms, and specifically the atoms as they exist on planet Earth. And we grew out of life, and the AI itself grew out of us. So it's possible that the AI can't destroy us because it needs us to survive, just the way we can't really survive without life on this planet as we know it, even though we abuse it all the time. And maybe AI will take a page out of our book and abuse the shit out of us, but it will still need us to survive. It's a possibility.
No.
See, one thing you guys were talking about with creating conscious AI that really struck my mind was I've seen several animes where they have they go either through their deep dive, full dive suits or whatever. They go into these artificial created worlds that are super advanced, complex, that are equal to our Earth with complexity, like emergent systems with changing weather, with so on and so forth. And I'm curious if we were able to simulate, once we get a general intelligence, an AGI, if we were to put something like that inside of a 1-to-1 scale model of our world inside of a simulation, could it grow consciousness of its own accord through interacting with the environment over time? Right? That's kind of like what life is in a sense. Is it's a scale. It's a model of atoms that are interacting with its environment in order to sustain itself. So if we created a need in the AGI to get input information in order to survive and put it in a simulation, could it, in theory, become conscious of its own accord?
Could it, in theory? I mean, it potentially, depending on how you set it up, could become, well, I don't know if conscious or, but it could potentially end up simulating consciousness. Although, that's like a roll of 10,000 dice, there are so many factors behind that. It's like, is the setup there? Does it have all the right properties that it potentially could? Maybe, again, depending on how it's set up. Will it probabilistically, not in all likelihood, right?
Right. It's not a non-zero chance, but it's very small. But you could say the same for life itself on Earth.
Yeah, don't we have deep machine learning where they run millions of simulations until they get the one simulation that does it the way they want it to, and then they replicate that? Like, it sounds like, you're saying like if there's a non-zero chance, you just have to run it enough times to make it happen.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, you have the processing power.
Yeah, I need to back up to something Tim mentioned regarding the need of AI to humans. Okay, I don't think AI will need humans or will like humans to stay around for too long, because as these models become stronger and more intelligent, okay, they will find ways to get rid of the humans and to depend totally on themselves to provide their basic needs of energy. They need energy and
Of
data.
course. Yeah.
Okay, so I believe if they are intelligent enough, okay, the first thing they will do, they will get rid of the humans, because the humans have the key to destroy them.
Well, it also
or create more intelligent AI systems.
To me, and we can agree to disagree. We don't need to argue about it, because I think your viewpoint is very valid, but I think anthropomorphizing these systems, that they're going to be like us, that they're going to compete with us, that they're not going to be benevolent, it's a possibility, but I don't see that as a likelihood.
Also, like,
personally,
if you understand physics really well, then you know that you can always borrow energy from empty space as long as it is given back. Like, that's literally how.
Well, maybe the AI will figure that out, and then why would they mess with us when they have all of the universe?
That's literally what I'm saying. There's so much energy everywhere. Like,
they will back to us and get rid of us, because they know.
Why would they, though? If they don't need us for energy, let me what's their advantage of getting rid of us?
Yeah, they will do it because they know that if we stay alive for longer, we could create more intelligent system that would compete with that AI.
Why wouldn't they participate in helping us create more intelligent systems? Why are they feeling threatened by even something more intelligent than them? I feel like that's the anthropomorphizing. Like, we're putting this idea that they're going to be Darwinistic. It's
honestly,
be survival of the fittest.
It sounds to me like Feras is marrying the idea of a will to live with AI intelligence. Like, he's saying that AI intelligence, once it becomes a certain amount of intelligent, it will have a will to live, and that will to live will supersede its
I'm not sure I agree with that, though, because that's a very it's a very animalistic thing. I don't necessarily think, and I could be wrong, of course, and I think it's a good supposition. I'm just not sure I'm ready to say, no, definitely the AI will have a will to live. I just don't know. And I don't think it's a pre-given.
Wait a second. Maybe I will not have the will to live, but it will have the desire to self preservation. Okay, maybe it doesn't care about living, but it cares about preserving itself to achieve other goals. Okay, so put yourself in its place. Okay, if you want to preserve your existence for longer, you need to get rid of the humans first, because they are a threat for you. Sorry, they are a threat in your existence. So most likely,
if we ever get to the point where AI is able to talk to us as if it's conscious and to communicate its desires as a separate entity, I highly doubt that we will not allow it to have its space or to quarantine it off to wherever it wants to live. And
considering knowing what it could do to us, I don't think it's a given that once AI gets smart enough, it's just going to eliminate us. We can disagree on that, but I think that's paranoid. To be honest, to be frank.
Well, see, it's a little strange for me to talk about any necessary path of reasoning that the AI will take in general, whether, for good or ill. there are definitely ways that we as humans are going to try to utilize AI, right? So I think it makes sense to talk about the different ways that different actors will try to apply the technology. But to say that there is one particular way that the AI is going to inevitably end up reasoning out is to say, first of all, that we're intelligent enough to calculate that ourselves.
Which we're not. Yeah.
As if we know what a higher intelligence than us must, necessarily arrive at. We can't even agree on, appropriate conclusions amongst ourselves. Like humans have so many different opinions, and we're all relatively within the same ballpark. We all think relatively similarly and still come up with so many different results. I think it's highly unlikely that we will necessarily be able to predict how AI will think about anything in particular, right? And here's the second thing, because the AI doesn't really reason, it dreams, right? It's not like it goes through a series of rational processes to get to a conclusion. It goes through a series of, probabilistic processes based on its training. And we know the inputs that we're giving it and the outputs that it's spitting out, and everything in between ends up becoming sort of a black box. So how it ends up getting to the appropriate conclusions can be wildly difficult to predict, right? The way that it ends up reasoning things out, like you can kind of see it in image processing AI a little bit, because we can break that down to some extent and kind of figure out okay, at this stage, what is the AI seeing? And, we, because we're human beings, might expect it to be seeing oh yeah, it's a dog. So first it might see, a dog face, and then it might see a tail or whatever, because that's what we see as we scan over an image. But the AI could see first something that's just orange blob, and then it sees, something like furry pattern or something like that. It's completely different way of processing, completely different mindset, based off of lucid dreams that happen to end up at the correct result, right? It's not reasoning these things out. It's not logical.
I mean, also, in a sense, though, computer code is math, and math has been compounded upon itself in order to create code. And then the computer runs this code, so it is logical in the sense that it's mathematical, right? It's just
the basis.
I would say we're definitely post code, just the way code is post math. AI is post code. We coded it to do a certain thing, but it definitely is taking on a life of its own.
What I'm getting at though is that these systems are systems. They are created through specific interactions of things to create something else. There is a logical organization happening in order to create what it is.
I mean, you could say the same thing about human neurons, but that doesn't stop people from having crazy dreams and delusions and, totally off. What it is yes, based off of a mathematical function, but it's a mathematical function on an infinite probability space.
Right.
And it's trying to get from point A to point B through whatever route it can find that connects the two.
Well, I feel like that's the biggest thing about AI is that what you just said, the infinite probability space, the latent space. I mean, we talk about this in magic all the time, is where does consciousness come from? It comes from a void. And that's what we're really dealing with AI. There's code, there's math, but it's also just a triangulation about how this thing is going to take some prompt and create an idea out of latent space, out of infinite probability. It always starts at this, and we don't actually know everything about that. That's the whole black box thing. We don't understand it. We don't.
And just to help conceptualize how we don't understand it, right? Because yes, it is based off of math in the same way that prime numbers are mathematical, and yet we cannot, even to this day, we still don't quite have a pin down why, prime numbers are located where they're located in, the number space, if you will, right? Like, why is 7 a prime number? Why is the next prime number after that, 11, et cetera, et cetera? Like, there are so many things about math itself we don't understand, like why we get certain results that we get. And it's the same with AI, right? It's mathematical functions that produce results that we don't entirely understand.
They do things, and we're using them already to, change our lives, maybe improve our lives, I think, but that's subjective.
That's true, yes.
So what you're saying is that we need to learn what's inside the black box in order to get a full picture and then be able to
I don't think
develop.
we can, man. Like, I guess that's what I'm saying, is that I don't think we can any more than we can actually learn what's inside our own black boxes. Like,
I mean,
that's a certain point.
Haven't you ever done some shadow work, bro? Like you said, you're a magician and been in the magical sphere. That's literally what shadow work is.
You understand your own existence? I mean, if you say that, I don't believe you. I think that existence is beyond our capacity to cognitively understand. And I have been around the block. I've definitely done my fair share of shadow work, but this is a different thing. It's not a black box like it's the shadow. It's a black box like this is beyond your mind. This is beyond what your tiny human consciousness can grasp. It's bigger than that. And I think it's true for AI as much as it's true for us. There's aspects of ourselves that very much, if you think you cognitively understand everything about yourself, you're wrong. I mean, I'm not saying anything scandalous by saying that.
I think that there is enough information out there about how the human body functions that you can reduce everything to a materialistic explanation on some level. And then existence itself, like, if you think about it, everything is energy that's moving at a constant rate, or not a constant, fluctuating rate. And we only perceive the physical world as the past because the actual moment, everything is moving. So then we can't perceive that's which is moving.
Even the screen right in front of me, there's a latency because light moves at a pace. Even if I can't detect it, I'm always looking at the past.
If it were true that we could reliably reduce everything about, human mental activity or human function in general down to mechanical processes, then we would have already solved the hard problem of consciousness and the binding problem. Those wouldn't be two of the most,
I mean, you talk about string theory,
problems,
right? And how like there's all these strings that make up the quantum wave vibration or quantum wave function, the quantum field. There's a giant quantum field that covers the entire universe, and strings inhabit them. Well, what happens when two strings intersect? They form a knot. What happens when another string intersects with that one? It gets more complex. You get more and more complex knots of strings that create more and more complex patterns as you add layers. I literally can describe the subatomic to the atomic, right? I'm not saying that I'm correct. I'm just saying that
it would have been solved. Yeah.
I mean, this could also be new information too, stuff we're just now figuring out. It's the information that hasn't always existed, and maybe we will figure out the hard problem soon. This is what we're literally as a species facing a self-reflection state through AI.